can feel the heat already from our red orb singeing our eyebrows, which means only one thing. It's Friday here, wherever you are, whenever you are, but we're online, we're on demand, and we've got Noah Bradley. We're Bethany College, and this is the Applied Arts Academy. Welcome, gang, to our last Friday slam of a gentleman from the industry. We're very fortunate to have a very, very cool guy, perhaps our youngest. Youth is being served today, and going to be served up in many doses. We of course, with the welcoming us from the gridiron to the hard court, the men's basketball team off to a pretty good fight. And to start, we'll follow them through the journey. If you pick us up in the spring, we'll find out how they do. The women's team, well, they're a little less than astute, shall we say, with the round ball, and we wish them well. Remember, we are Bethany. We're Swedes. And today, your instructor, the most noble Mr. Brown, who was just recently at the Museum of the City of New York, is pleased to present Mr. Noah Bradley. Noah, welcome to our class.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We note that your birthday is October the 21st. AAAers, put that in your calendar to wish them birthday greetings next year. And I've also told 4 people to forward theirs to you because they share birthdays with you. Alfred Nobel of the prize, Hernando de Soto discovered the automobile, I believe. Dizzy Gillespie, and none other than Kim Kardashian. Man, you're in some pretty good company there, Noah.
Yeah, I'm really there. It's great.
As Theodore Roosevelt popularized a very well-known West African phrase, speak softly and carry a big stick. I would assume that piece of lumber behind you is a pretty good sized stick. Where on earth is this picture?
This is in Australia, down where I live right now. About 9-10 months ago, I found a pretty lady and ended up moving down here. So this is along the southern coast. There are some rainforests down there, and just an average old tree by the side of the trail.
I imagine Australia, and if you get over to New Zealand, which I have been to, is a fascinating new kinds of landscapes that probably perk your imagination. But speaking of perking your imagination, you grew up outside of Charlottesville, a little town called Earlysville. Tell us about your folks. What did your mom and dad do? What was life like as a kid? Were you a bicycle kid or a quote a serious nerd?
I was a serious nerd and a serious outdoor kid. I actually grew up slightly north of where you got right there. That's where I ended up moving at a certain point in my life. But I actually grew up a little bit further outside of town in a very tiny town that you might not be able to even find on Google Maps, called Wolftown. And my parents were wonderful, amazing parents that I dearly. And my dad built houses and owned his own company that he started actually the winter after I was born. He decided to start a construction company in the dead of winter with 3 small children, and somehow managed to make it all work. And so for my whole life, my dad built houses and ran his own company and supported all of us with it. And looking back, I actually see how influential that all was to me, because I do see that I was basically taught at a young age that you can support yourself, you can make cool things, and people will give you money for it. And he even would sit at a drafting table sometimes and draw plans, and it showed me, hey, you can draw stuff, and people will give you money for that. So I think all of that actually came into play later in my life. But as a kid, I would play immense amounts of video games, watch a lot of movies and sci-fi and fantasy with my dad, and also basically just spend a lot of my childhood outside. I really, really liked going out in the woods. We owned a few acres there, and I would just love just getting outside, going into the woods, having fun.
What were some of your favorite video games? Were they the action games or sports games?
I played a lot of different stuff, but I mean, a lot of the role-playing games, the old Final Fantasy 4 and 6 for the really old school guys in the crowd, and you know, a bunch of the other old classics. You know, I remember the first time I played Super Mario 64, seeing all the 3D graphics for the first time. I still remember that, and yeah, I grew up playing video games with my brother, and still play them somewhat to this day.
Were you into comic books? Was there a comic book store in town? Was that a draw?
Surprisingly, no. Surprisingly, I just never really got into comic books. And maybe it's just because I wasn't exposed to them. Maybe it was because my friends weren't really into them either. But for whatever reason, I sort of missed comic books when I was a kid, and only started to appreciate them much later in life. Probably about the time I started going to college, honestly.
And high school, did you go to a big regional high school or a small local school? Uh, just
Uh,
high school.
very, very small. I did not, in fact, go to high school or any school, really. I was homeschooled from the very beginning all the way to college. My mom, we all got to a certain age, decided she didn't really want to send us off to school, so she taught us herself. And then eventually we got tutors and all that. And before long, I was taking college classes and totally skipped the whole school thing.
Interesting. And you turned out pretty normal. Good for you. Were any of
Yeah, I
those
mean,
tutors or any of the homeschooling in art or art history?
I did do some art, no art history that I can really recall, but we definitely did take art classes, and I did occasionally have little cute art classes where I would do bad drawings and bad paintings and bad sculptures and all of that. But yeah,
So then time comes to go to college. Was there ever a consideration that you not go to college?
I guess briefly, but not really. The other thing that I guess I should note is that I actually started by going to a small community college there in Charlottesville. And because I was homeschooler and because I was a nerd and because I didn't see any reason not to, I actually started fairly young. So I signed up for my first class uh, in college when I was 14, studying of all things computer programming.
And did it come easy to you? Are you also a pretty good at math kind of guy?
I am probably, at least at the time, I was far better at programming than I was at art.
So after the community college, you went to Providence, Rhode Island, the Rhode Island School of Design. Why did you choose RISD?
Uh, I like my brother, who's now a giant corporate lawyer and makes bajillions of dollars. Am a very driven person. I need to be the absolute best at whatever I do. And so when you look online, you find out that RISD is generally considered one of the top three art schools in our nation. And with that in mind, and with the fact that it seemed to have a good illustration program, which seemed to be the closest to what I actually wanted to do, which is make cool images and get paid for it. That's sort of why I ended up picking that as my major. So that building you see there on the left is actually the illustration department, and I ended up spending the bulk of a year right there.
Who was the chair of the illustration department at that time? And were there any? Did you take any classes with David Macaulay? I know he taught there. Who were some of the better teachers while you were at
No, I
RISD?
actually didn't take any classes with him while I was there. The chair, I think they rotate them every year or two, but I believe the chair at the time was Nick Janeshig.
Okay.
I think he was heading up the department at the time. But probably one of my favorite teachers that I ended up having there is an illustrator by the name of Lars Grant West, and he is a something of a fantasy illustrator. Works for all the big clients for that. Paints really, really gorgeous dragons and all that, and but comes from an interesting background of actually researching lots of nature. He's a guy that has live, like, flesh-eating maggots that clean off bones. He's quite the character, but was one of the most influential teachers for me there.
I have a great recipe for flesh-eating maggots with a fine Chianti. It's really delicious. I know we're going to talk a little bit about your take on traditional bricks and mortar college. RISD, was it the kind of program you expected to have? Was it draw from the plaster cast, draw from the live model, or was it more esoteric, more about the idea, or was it more about the craft?
RISD, all things considered, is I think, in my opinion, a phenomenal art school. It taught me a whole lot, and I do think that in many ways their education model is actually very good. It's not perfect, but it's fairly solid. I certainly didn't learn to do any cast drawing while I was there, but there was no disparagement of traditional drawing techniques, traditional painting, and learning strong technical foundations, any more so than any illustration department has, as much as they might fight with the painting departments all over the world.
Well, Providence, Rhode Island is actually a pretty neat little city. It's like most northern cities. It's gone on hard times as manufacturing has moved on, but academically it does have Brown University, and it also has a great culinary school whose name, of course, I won't remember now. And there was a RISD senior who was kind of a performance artist, and he convinced the school and the town to allow him to have a little event where he would take tires, inner tubes, and line them with wood and put some firewood on it and sink a rock underneath them so they wouldn't move, and he lit them on fire. And there was 8 of them, and everyone sort of heard by word of mouth that they should go check it out that Saturday night, and it was pretty cool stuff. So all of a sudden the town says, we'd like to take that over and make that our own, and now you have water fire on the riverbanks of Providence, and I think there's probably other cities that done it. John, you mentioned that it's done in Kansas City. Did you ever witness one of these things? Is it as cool and dramatic as it looks?
I did go to one, and it is fairly cool the first time. The trouble with Waterfire and the pretty canal that you see is that every shot of the canal is pretty, and in fact, my first experience with the canal, it was in fact full of dead fish floating down the canal. So slightly less picturesque and smelly as all hell.
I can imagine. So after RISD, you transferred to Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, which has a darn good art program and one remarkably good teacher who we've already mentioned. Why did you make the change? What stage of your college career, how many years were you at RISD before you made the change to VCU, and was there a reason for it?
Yeah, I was actually only at RISD for 1 year. Not my freshman year, though. I transferred up there. As I had mentioned, I had gone to a community college for a number of years. I had technically actually took a couple classes at UVA there in Charlottesville as well. So in a sense, VCU was my fourth college that I went to. So I spent 1 year at RISD before transferring down to VCU for my, I suppose it was my third year. And the reason I did it is for a few different reasons, but among them is certainly money. If I had continued at RISD and finished my degree there, I would have ended up with over $100,000 in debt. And I knew that at the time, and I knew that would be a terrible way to try to start an art career. As it stood, I already was going to end up with about $40,000 in debt, which is still a fairly astronomical number for someone who's 20 years old or whatever. So I ended up going to VCU, partially because I heard it was a good program. It's very, very affordable, would give me the time to finish out my degree, develop a portfolio more or less on my own on the side, and hopefully get working by the time I graduated. And so that's sort of the reason I made the switch.
Well, I know VCU has a wonderful gallery and programs and museum studies and such. They even have a master's program. Did you get your bachelor's degree? Do you have a sheepskin?
Yes, I have one. I'm not really sure where it's at because I never really cared all that much, but yes, I technically do have a BFA.
Do you have any interest or thought about going on to a master's, which might be a requirement if you ever wanted to teach at a university? Any interest at this point in pursuing a master's?
I toss it around from time to time, but it's something I wouldn't touch for quite a while, and it's also not something I would do unless I hit one of the top three schools again. Um, in that case, I'd mainly be doing it for the name more so than necessarily experience.
Yeah. Well, I asked Sterling about you, Noah, and he said that Noah was doing professional work already and had come from RISD with something to prove, almost a chip on your shoulder. At VCU, he did prove it and held the standard for the entire department. Pretty high praise from Sterling. What did you take classes with Sterling, by the way?
I did. I took a couple classes with him, and yes, we did end up developing quite a bit of a friendship over the time. We certainly clashed heads. We're both very strong-willed, stubborn people, and I suppose that's natural to happen. But yeah, in the end, we came out on the side.
And what would you say were some of Sterling's pearls of wisdom that he imparted? Or was he a guy who taught craft, or was he a guy who taught the thinking part of it? You already had the determination, you had the perspiration. Did he lend some inspiration?
Yeah, he was without a doubt one of the best art teachers I've ever had. I sort of look back and I can think of probably two or three instructors that really guided me to where I am today, and he's certainly one of those. And he is without a doubt artist that I know. Seeing him do his brainstorming, ideation, thumbnailing stuff still blows my mind every single time he does it. I myself in a couple of his classes tried the exact same thing and ended up with some absolutely horrible illustrations. So the fact that he manages to pull all that stuff off just blows my mind every time. But seeing how hard he worked to get where he was, seeing his intense drive for things, and sort of being encouraged by that really, really helped me in my career.
I'll bet. I'll bet. I saw an interview with you where you were talking about your college experience, and interviewer asked, well, what would you tell students to do? And I thought it was actually very spot on that you would require, not even encourage, that to be doing their own personal work. As you said, if you do every assignment and get an A and nothing else, well, you really haven't gotten an art education. You haven't proved to yourself that you've got this inner voice. You walked out of VCU already having done some professional work, a solid portfolio in the business you wanted to pursue. What was your personal work that you were doing at this time, and was it ever publicly used or exhibited?
Yeah. I was actually I ended up sort of pursuing environment art, environment concept art, and illustration. And as I sort of go through my work later, you'll be able to see that progression. But for me, that personal work was hugely influential. It was really cornerstone of that portfolio that I developed, and it was very, very important for me. And actually, the first piece that I got into Spectrum was one of those pieces that I did in school while I was studying and just for myself. And yeah, landed me in Spectrum, that was a fun day to go to Sterling's class, getting to tell everyone that I got into Spectrum that day.
A little bit of crowing is good for the soul.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
sure they loved me that day.
I know that art students, and I don't want to get too heavy into your thoughts on it just yet. Maybe at the end of our hour we will. But you did say in another interview that schools don't necessarily teach you the living at art. They teach you how to make art. I have a nephew who's taken 6 years to get through art school. He has some medical issues, but for the most part, he's turned out a body of work which he's going to exhibit very soon. And he was here for Thanksgiving dinner, and I was telling Marco that, make sure that this work you're exhibiting now is not your best work in a short amount of time, that you can continue to grow. And he kind of took umbrage at that. Perhaps I was a little heavy-handed. Do you think it's important that student work be separated from professional work? Should there be growth beyond what you do in the classroom when you have to do it for yourself?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. I don't know that I ever really had a class assignment ever end up in an actual portfolio, as sad as that is. There's a bit of a different mindset for it, and I think in some ways it's actually a good thing because I think it is good to realize that the work you do in school isn't so much about the end result. It's about the process of learning to make art. And I think that's an important distinction to make. And so, yeah, I think separating out that personal work and that work for classes is very, very important. Sometimes they get to overlap. Sterling, for instance, was very, very good about letting people, myself included, pursue their own work rather than dictate exactly what they do. And I think that was
Well, we won't embarrass them by polling the students and asking them how much work they've done this semester outside of their portfolio. But I think, gang, you just heard it from the best that personal work is really important. So after school, you had debt. You decided to move back home. This probably isn't where you moved, but I got to tell you, you were a bit of a slippery heel on the internet to find information about. But this is, you call it the view from your back door?
yeah, that actually is where I am. That's the view from my folks' place.
It's absolutely gorgeous. It looks like a painting, and I can imagine how that would inspire you.
Yeah, it definitely did.
You walked out of school with the student debt. You decided to move home so that you could work and pay that off, and I applaud you for that. My two guys ended up University of Maryland and Syracuse. They each have about 25K each. We try to help them out with it, but they've got friends who have six figures, and it is a heavy, heavy albatross to carry. When you were living at home, were your folks really keen on the fact that, wow, Noah's actually making a living doing this stuff, making pictures? Were they really proud of what you were doing, or did they understand it?
I don't know that they understood it. I still don't know that they really know what I actually do for a living. But they do understand that I am making a living at it, and they do understand that I absolutely love what I do. And so yes, they were immensely proud of me. I've been extremely thankful to have parents that are and have always been supportive of what I wanted to do. When I first told them that I wanted to pursue art, actually, uh, my dad told me a story about how his dad hadn't let him take art classes back in high school and had made him take history classes instead. So when his son came along and all of a sudden wants to be an artist, uh, oh, totally behind me. So I'm extremely parents that have supported me every step of the way.
Noah, your family, are they generations of Virginiaites? Virginians?
To some degree, yes. On one of the lines, basically, we traced it back, and I am actually a direct descendant of John Smith. So yeah, you could say I've been in Virginia for a while. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. While you were in school, you were obviously thinking about how you were going to market yourself, and you got involved with a IllexCon, which I believe is the Allentown Art Museum. I saw Donato Giancola, Greg Hildebrandt on their website, so it's obviously first class. What was your involvement with IllexCon, and do you encourage young artists to buy into a booth or such? You need to have a product name before you start this, the Comic Con kind of opportunities.
LuxCon was hugely influential to me. I went to my first one, actually the first year that I was at VCU, and it was soon after the semester started, and I had to take a couple days off of classes just to go. Um, I went up there. I went up there as a student with a absolutely whole portfolio, and I didn't know anyone at the show. I didn't know anything that was going on. But I knew all of these names were going to be there, that I loved their work, and I loved, what they had done, and I knew I needed to. So I made the effort to go up there and attend this show, and it was incredible. I got to see just mind-blowing original paintings um, all over the place that showed me like, oh my God, people are actually doing this, and they're creating these beautiful works of art. And it just blew my mind. I just sort of wandered around the show seeing all this stuff, and it was just incredible. And I also showed that terrible portfolio to these incredible artists, and they were the nicest people you could ever imagine. They were patient with me, they were understanding, and really encouraging too. And they gave me some great advice on how to improve my work, how to progress with it. And honestly, it sort of served as a nice guide for where I needed to go with my work for this specific industry. And so I actually set a goal for myself that the next year would be a whole new year, so to speak. That is to say, I would take all the advice that they had given me, really work on it, and a year from that point, at the next IllexCon, I would, blow them all away. And I think to some degree I actually managed to pull that off. By the next year, I was working professionally, almost full time. I was right around the corner from getting some really big clients. I guess I had done paintings that would eventually end up in Spectrum. I'd actually done it. I had taken my horrible, terrible portfolio, taken their really good advice, and managed to turn things around.
Oh, students, you can't get better advice than that. Donato Giancola there, of course, one of the real rock stars of fantasy and science fiction. He had a similar plan, Noah, when he came out of University of Vermont, I believe. He wanted to be doing science fiction paperback covers. He wanted to work for Irene Gallo. He said he needed some pocket change. Could he work at the Society? So he was in our coat room for 6 months doing some work, but doing his own painting and drawing. And in 6 months, he had 6 perfect samples. Took them to her. His phones never stopped ringing. Indeed, to have a plan, and of course, you have to implement it. You have to have the drive. Let's talk a little bit about Wizards of the Coast and work you've done for them. Your first assignment for them was to do a multiple of landscapes, and that was kind of a surprise that you would get multiple. What was it like? What is it like working for Wizards of the Coast? And what was it about that first assignment? How'd you get that?
Wizards is wonderful. I've absolutely loved working for them. My first magic work came about a month after I graduated from VCU. I was still living in Richmond, and I sent a postcard out to the art director for Magic, and just one of those old traditional postcards that usually art's useless and a terrible assignment given by mean professors. I actually made up a postcard, wrote a quick little note on the back, and sent it off. And 2 weeks later, got my first job. And whatever it is, 3.5 years later, I'm still working for him.
Do you remember what the
So yeah.
image was on that postcard?
Yes, the image, it's a painting called Hope of Glory. I think it actually comes up in a slideshow that I'll talk about later. And it's basically just a big painting of a cloud. But apparently it was good enough to catch his eye and land me some work.
That's a good example that it doesn't all have to have digits to it. It doesn't all have to be computerized. I think any visual person loves getting mail. Visual mail has a powerful impact. This doesn't all get thrown away, so that's a good reminder that things can be done both ways, but the traditional still has some chops to it. Looking at your landscapes, they're just it's Jasper Johns meets Jasper Cropsey. It's just bizarre stuff. A couple that really drove me. I saw this. This is just unbelievable. It's called The Moat, I believe. And what was the assignment here? What was the effect you were trying to create?
I mean, basically, they wanted a moat. That was effectively it for the assignment. It's actually a repainting of an old card, and Magic, of course, has been around for 20 years or so. The old illustrations are, with all due respect to those guys, pretty terrible. They weren't given a lot of direction, and basically they'd hire anybody back then, and you can tell. Looking back at the old painting, it's not very good. So it was kind of a chance for me to take an entirely new spin on it. And this is one of those paintings where I got really lucky with, and it was a bit ahead of the skill level that I was at the time. And the art director ended up being so happy with it, he sent a rather how should I say this? F-bomb heavy email telling me how happy he was.
A question I want to ask you, and I've asked some of the other entertainment people, especially if they've been around a little bit, and how you're reflecting on Magic cards 20 years ago. Do you think that the imagery bar has been raised pretty high because of the increases of the technically possible things that we see in movies? Make a movie today that looks like a movie from 1950. The people would say, duh. So the bar keeps getting raised as new things are able to be done physically in movies, and do you think it's reflecting in art? The thought process. Okay. painted 15 covers for the Post of the branches of the service. Very successful. And then around 1960, Rockwell moved to Stockbridge because his wife had died and he remarried, and Schaefer moved to Island, and the world of illustration had kind of passed him by. And in the bicentennial in 1976, a gallery was going to try to sell traditional illustration, and they put the word out. They said, do we know where any of these old farts are? And I got on the phone, and actually I found Mead Schaefer was living out on Long Island. And I called the number, and a woman answered, and I said, is this Mrs. Schaefer? She said, yes. I said, I'm calling from the Society of Illustrators, and someone would like to ask me to come to lunch next week. Pause. She says, well, I'll ask him, but I don't think he'll want to go. Said, okay. So I could hear her shoes on the floor walking away, and then a muffled conversation. And she came back, and she says, you know what? He'll be there next Thursday. No, he's an old man. He's had many strokes. He's about 83 years old. No one had even seen him probably in 20 years. But we'll see him there. So the day came, dining room was a buzz. I wasn't a director yet, but I went to Frank Wilbright, the bartender, and said, Frank, you won't believe who's going to be here today. Mead Schaefer. Mead Schaefer? Oh, cool. He's still alive? I said, yep, he's today. The dining room's on the third floor. There's a little closed-circuit TV to the front door, and I was watching it, and the car pulls up, and I bound down the steps, and opened the door, and this frail little guy goes right by me, and his wife looks at me and says, I'll never see him again. She went to go park the car. I went, what? So I bound up the stairs, got behind Mr. Schaefer as he walked into the dining room, and Frank, like a professional bartender he was, says, Mr. Schaefer, how great to see you. You're looking terrific. Will you have your regular? Oh, yes, Frank, I'll have my regular. Schaefer walked in, and there was a bit of a buzz because this guy's Rockwell's best friend. Walked to the end of the bar. Ray fixes a Manhattan, bourbon and sweet vermouth. Puts a cherry in it. Schaefer at the end of the bar, his head was hardly over the bar, and he drank that down with a big smile on his face, and the crowd, they didn't all part and be quiet, but you could just tell there was a bit of a buzz, and he walked for him, and he sat down at a table, and he keeled over, and he died. I think, what a way to go out. One last moment of glory in the place, your star-studded place at one time, not a frail old man wasting away out in Long Island. That's how Mead Schaefer left this world. Tell you, gang, if I'm 83 and I'm me back to the Society of Illustrators and give me a Mead Schaefer Manhattan. Hope you like that story. It's a good one. We move on in your life, Noah. I've heard a lot about your travels. Well, I believe you've been in Bucharest, London, Switzerland. You've been to Iceland. These are great. The Gherkin. Did you see the Gherkin when you were there last week?
From a distance, yeah.
It's a really funny building. When you get up close to it, you guys say, why did they build this? And Iceland, and the story in Iceland, which is just a fascinating place, and I must go someday, is that you got around by hitchhiking. Is that true?
Yeah, I was a little crazy. Figured not. So yeah, I actually hitchhiked the whole time.
And is that a terrifying experience in a strange land where you don't understand the language?
Oh, from time to time it is, but for the most part it was actually a wonderful experience. Iceland tends to be very good about hitchhiking, which is part of the reason I did it there. And I guess it came about that I wasn't actually planning to hitchhike, but the first day I really needed a ride to the next city. It was either I wait around for a couple hours for the next bus, or I walk out to the road and stick my thumb out and see what happens. And so I was like, yeah, hell, why not? And walked out to the road and got a ride in 5 minutes, got a great conversation on the way over, and there you go. I started hitchhiking. I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And so I had a great time, met a lot of cool people, and got around the whole island fairly fast. So yeah, it was a great time.
Is it as visually dramatic as Google Images can make it look? Is it a, an inspiring place visually?
Oh, oh yeah. It is also probably the weirdest landscape I have ever seen. It's very strange looking down and seeing black dirt underneath your feet and covered in the most fluorescent green moss you've ever seen. Parts of it look like the moon, parts of it like this weird otherworldly landscape. It's a very, very strange place, but very, very beautiful all at the same time.
Of the places you've traveled, including Australia, and the reasons for your traveling, I know you stated someplace that you have issues about. Is this really where you're getting your inspiration for your landscapes? Is it places you've seen, or is it just an amalgam of different places? Are you encouraging travel students?
Yeah, for me, travel is immensely important, both for my own personal satisfaction as well as my career. It's very fun for me to get out there and actually see the stuff with my own two eyes. And getting to see all these incredible landscapes and beautiful places has definitely influenced my work. Um, yeah, so I do strongly encourage that students, if they're at all able, do at least some traveling.
And when you travel, are you a photographer or are you a on-plane air painter like Winslow Holmes?
I am actually a photographer. I am really bad or really good, sure, but I almost never do paintings while I travel. I tend to use travel as something of a break from painting all the time. And so I actually take time off and just sort of observe nature around me and kind of try to take it all in. And, not always, but for the most part, that's the case.
Well, I'm sure your visual memory is pretty keen of things that you've seen that just are back in one of those synapses that'll come out in one of your paintings when you need to. So now you're in Melbourne, which is a pretty darn cool city. And what did you find the most dramatic difference about living in that culture from the U.S.?
Not as much as you might think. They're basically Americans. They're Americans that talk really funny. So yeah, not as much culture shock as you might think. They do say really funny words, so I actually have a file on my computer with a list of all of the funny words I have heard since I got here.
Is there a visual language there that's has funny words to it, the way they do their advertising or billboards or movie posters? Is there some different kind of quirky look to
It's basically
their
American
world?
with a slightly European twist to things. So you'll see a little bit more European typography and whatnot, and European signage, and yeah, it's an interesting thing.
Fascinating. Well, I'm very much looking forward to your demonstration, and I hope there you can explain to us how you get the sun to shine out of your keister. I think that's a marvelous capability. That's almost superhero-like. It's been kind of fun talking with you, and looking forward to finding out more about your work. I hope you don't think it's been too bumpy of a ride, but I've enjoyed learning about your brief career so far. Are you kind of amazed at how far you've gotten? What are you, 28 years old now?
26
How
actually,
far
and
you've
yes,
gotten?
yes, I am. I'm quite amazed at how well everything has gone so far. It's been quite a ride.
Do you think that ride was planned or just much
I
of it
did
was
work my
by
butt off to
happenstance?
get where I am today, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I have gotten extremely lucky over the years too.
There was a fascinating YouTube, which I've shared with students before. It's the commencement speech at Boston University's Communication Department by a photojournalist by the name of Tyler Hicks. Noah, I'll send you the link. He's 47 years old. He's been in all the war zones of the world. He's won 7 Pulitzer Prizes, and his take on where you get to places is uh, you start in a small place, you learn your craft, you catch a break, and you be bold. And as I apply that to what I think you explained to us today, being bold is part of it. You had a plan. If you knew you had a year to do it, and you got out there and you did it, that's the bold part of it. Uh, is there anything that can spark that boldness in a person, or does it just have to be natural?
I think yes and no. I think it is something almost in you to either want something or not, and that's sort of the one thing that I don't think can be taught. I can't teach a student to want something, for instance. Um, I can teach them obviously what to do if they do want something, but teaching that desire I think is impossible. And so you can definitely find it in yourself. I, for instance, enjoy drawing and painting a lot more if I'm actually drawing and painting. But I think it does have to come from somewhere. And I actually sort of tell students somewhat discouraging advice these days that if you don't really like drawing and painting, why are you trying to like drawing and painting? Um, sometimes you might be able to convince yourself that you do like it, but if at the core of things you don't really enjoy it, why are you doing it? So I figure that will either really, really piss off some students or encourage the others. So I think it's probably a good piece of advice.
It's very good advice. If you don't like to get your hands dirty, don't be a car mechanic. Noah, you're a rising star. Your star's up there pretty high. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and I'm very much looking forward to the demo. I will turn over the reins of those arrows, starting with slide number 33. And thanks a lot for letting me be part of your story.
Yeah, thanks so much, Terry. Appreciate it. I am actually going to disappear for 2 seconds to use the bathroom because I just had a cup of tea and I really need to go to the bathroom, and this is going to be really uncomfortable to talk if I don't. So I will be back in 2 seconds.
He doesn't know that we've attached a pro cam to his back so we can watch him pee. This is going to be great. Gang, I'm going to actually miss doing these little episodes. That this is our last week. It's been fun. Wait a minute, who's doing that? And I hope that some of the advice that was offered up by each one of them individually, if you put an amalgam on it, it's good stuff. I hope you've been keeping a notebook, and every so often go back and look at those notes. If you come up with one line that each one of them said that really rang true, then I think we've had not only a little bit of fun and learned a little bit of things along the way, but some pearls of knowledge that'll help us down the road. So, oh, I hear the flush. We're all good to go. Yep.
All right. Yeah, we're good. Sorry about that. Cool. So now I guess I will do some talking. So now that you sort of have a general idea of how my life went about, I'd like to talk a little bit more about my art in specific. And so here is, let's see if I can get the slides to work. There we go. So here's me, adorable Noah Bradley. My younger years, probably living out in Wolftown or something like that, and making amazing art. I grew up and was never actually that amazing as an artist. My mom actually said a wonderful thing to me just a couple of years ago that I was really nothing amazing as a kid as far as art goes, which is both a little humbling and almost insulting from your mother. But the frank thing is that I wasn't really a talented, amazing kid at art. I liked making stuff, but I was never the best at it. But I think the important thing is that I actually liked making stuff. And something that's sort of carried through my whole life. I really like the idea of taking nothing or taking raw materials and making something out of it. I mentioned early on my dad builds houses, and he taught me actually how to build houses as well. I'm a halfway decent carpenter if I ever need to be. If the art thing ever fails for me, I can always pick up a hammer. So, but mainly that idea of just making things. And the other expression that I've had for making things has also come out of programming. I wanted to be a computer programmer. Specifically, I wanted to make video games. And so for a number of years, I actually studied computer programming and was a far better programmer than I was an artist. But I did decide that I wanted to pursue art. Um, this is the sort of work that I was doing probably about the time I was 17 or 18. So fairly technically adept, classical cast drawing type work, and doing fairly well with it. Um, but it was around this time that I actually decided I wanted to do it for a living. Before that, I had just sort of assumed that I would do it as a hobby. It was something that I really liked doing, but I didn't really want to make money at it. It wasn't really something that I was all that interested in. But I decided right about the time that I was 18, on a very specific day, that I would take the following week and figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, which was a stupid thing to do and something that only an 18-year-old kid could do. And by the end of that week, I actually did figure out what I wanted to do. And through a lot of lists and pros and cons lists and whatnot, I did come to the idea that art was going to be the best thing for me. And oddly enough, it's not because it's what I was best at. And it's also not what I obviously make the most money at. In fact, it was one of the things I was worst at, one of the things I would make the least amount of money at. I could make a far, far better living if I was a programmer or I built houses. And I probably would be far, far better at those too. So it's a little strange that I would pick art, all things considered. But the reason for it is, in the end, that I decided for the longest, because it would provide an eternal challenge to me. It would always be challenging. I would never get to the point in my art that I would feel satisfied with it completely. And I knew that early on. I knew I would never get to the end, so to speak. Whereas with the other things, I could sort of see almost a finite amount of work going into it. At programming, for instance, I'd see a certain amount of work go into it, and eventually the technical skills would fade away, and I would be left only with the desire to make games. And yes, that could definitely provide me a lot of expression, but I enjoyed the fact that the technical side of things would always be improving. I would always be getting better at it. I would never be wholly satisfied, even with the technical side of things. And I guess there was something nice about that in my mind, sort of an eternal frustration with things. So I did this sort of work. This was one of my early teachers. I took some private lessons with him. My best friend was actually one of the models for his paintings, and that's sort of how I got the connection. My best friend was doing some models for some religious paintings that this guy was doing, and we sort of made the connection of, hey, I like art, I like drawing, maybe I'll take some lessons there. And he took me in. He was a very classically trained portrait painter and taught me how to draw a half-decent portrait and do some cast drawings and really, really work on my observational ability. He's a wonderful now and manages to support them all just with his, again, very classical portrait paintings and religious paintings, and very beautiful stuff. And so that was some of my education before I went off to art school, which is where I started doing the really, really bad stuff that you're about to see. Feel free to laugh. This was actually a take on the Brothers Karamazov. And one of the first things I did at RISD. They're the best art school in the nation, as they like to say. This is the type of god-awful work that I was doing. It's horrendous. I still don't really know what I was thinking at the time. It is horrible in every possible way. But I was doing this work. This is an example of an assignment that I took. One of the teachers said they didn't really like how I drew hands, and so I just did this thing where I drew God knows how many hands, and drove myself crazy doing it, but I think I learned a thing or two at the same time. This is a terrible painting for me. This was done in one of my illustration classes at RISD, and is in many ways the last time I have ever painted a horse, because I painted this horse, and you know, for the time, the whole painting's about what my skill level was at, which is terrible, but it's about where I was at. But the horse, everyone talked about the horse. I brought it into critique, and that is all that anyone talked about for about 20 to 30 minutes. It was just nonstop talking about how terrible this horse is. And it's true, it's a terrible, awful horse. But it sort of scarred me for life, and now I absolutely hate painting horses. So this is sort of my last horse painting. Maybe someday I'll take the challenge again, but hopefully not for a long time. So this is the sort of work I was doing at the time. Lots of this sort of weird creature, weird character, strange concept design kind of stuff. Yeah, it's what I really, really liked doing. I am not by any means, you know, a character art guy. Like, I don't do characters, I don't do creatures. I like trying to do them, but it's not really what I'm known for. But it is what was really, really fun for me. And this is just an example of that. Something I was doing for one of my classes, I think. And yeah, so for the longest time, I really liked this stuff, and I really hated environments, and which is sort of a strange thing to say, considering I'm basically known for painting environments these days. But at the time, I really hated environments. I hated almost the idea of them. I would actually go to them and see beautiful, amazing landscape paintings, and really just walk right past them. I didn't really see anything to them. There wasn't anything for me to look at. I didn't really like them. And even here, you can see I don't really like painting the environment. I sort of around and did half of an environment to sort of imply something back there, but I didn't really care. And for the longest time, that was the case. I was so focused on doing whatever was in the foreground, whatever this cool character or creature was, I never really cared about what was happening in the background. The irony of which is profound. Here's some of the sketchbook stuff I was doing in the time. I always did tons and tons and tons and tons of the sketchbook stuff, and this is an example of that. And here you can see 2008, so that's what I was doing about 6 years ago. And that's about the skill level I was at. So yeah, I did these weird characters, lots of these weird creatures. Just being a huge nerd. I like drawing robots and stuff like that. Yeah, it was fun times for me. Another example of a horrendous, terrible, awful, horrible thing that I did for one of my classes. I don't think I used any reference. I think I painted it in one night, the night before the class, and just nothing good about it whatsoever. Yeah, it's really... This, on the other hand, was one of the paintings that sort of was a groundbreaking one for me. This was actually the first painting I did in the class for Lars Grant West, who I mentioned earlier. This was an illustration for some Russian folktale. I forget exactly which one it was. And actually went through the effort of getting a model, a friend of mine who happened to even be Russian, and posing her, lighting her, taking nice photos, all that sort of stuff, so that I could kind of do this nice oil painting illustration. And it was also right about the time that I believe I downloaded and watched, I think it was Dan Dos Santos's um, video tutorial that he did for Massive Black way back in the day. And it was really good for me because it taught me, like, all right, this is how you go step by step in creating a oil illustration that sort of vaguely looks like a cover. And so that's where this came from. And so that was the source of this piece, which was successful and very lucky for me at the time in terms of my skill level. This is an example of the first imaginative environment I ever painted. This is the first landscape that I painted from my head, and it's all over the place. There's the Photoshop grass going on. There's some stupid figure, I think, in the middle. It's really awful. The water looks okay, I guess, sometimes, but who knows what's happening with the greens in there. It's really bad. And just goes to show that, yeah, I wasn't always very good at this stuff. I was, in fact, quite bad at this stuff. But the summer of my junior year. Sorry. Yeah, the summer of my junior year, I did something really groundbreaking that sort of changed my career for the rest of my life, in that I actually went outside. And for the longest time, I had sort of separated my art and my love of going outside. I loved hanging out outside, going for hikes, walking in the woods, playing with sticks, being a boy outside. But I had never really combined all of that with my painting. And this summer I did. I started bringing my paints outside. I had a horrible setup. I would bring maybe a piece of paper taped to a board, some acrylic paints, and usually a paper plate for my palette, some old mangled brushes, and maybe a jar of water. And that was my terrible painting setup. I didn't have an easel or anything. I always sat on the ground and set up all this stuff and started painting. And it was so much fun. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. Even when it was hot and you were sweating and you were fighting bugs off your painting and they were just dying in the paint, and it was terrible. The wind was blowing all your supplies around and you couldn't see anything, and it was just a blast. I loved it. I got to be out in nature and you got to experience all this stuff and you got to smell it and feel it. It was a whole different experience. All of a sudden, something clicked and I realized landscapes are awesome. Landscapes are so much fun because you actually get to be outside and experience this stuff and live what you're actually painting. And it was huge for me. And so that summer I actually did quite a bit of plein air painting and developed the skills that would really help me later on, and taught me so much about lighting, about color, about some of the natural forms you see outside, how to paint rocks, how to paint grass, how to paint trees, all that kind of stuff. Um, it was huge for me, and it was also just so much fun. This is actually one of the first that I ever did out there, and had no idea what I was doing, had no idea the proper technique for anything, had no idea about anything, but it was just kind of throwing paint at it and trying my best and trying to capture what I was seeing and feeling, and it was a blast. And as it turns out, people really enjoyed it. And I started doing more of this stuff from imagination at the same time. And this is a lot of the kind of stuff I was doing after school. So I would do all my assignments. VCU was, with all due respect, quite a lot easier than RISD. There was far less work to do at VCU than at RISD. And so I had a bit more spare time there. And so I took that spare time and did quite a bit of personal work. And this is an example of one of the sketches I would have done around that time. And this actual particular piece comes comes into play later, so keep it in mind. But this is an example of those. And the thing I noticed very early on was that people responded to this stuff. I had done the character and creature stuff for so long, but as soon as I started doing this stuff, something about it really connected with people, and all of a sudden they were talking more about the landscapes and environments I was doing than any of the characters or creature stuff I was doing. And that's a bit discouraging at first because I'm like, oh, I put all this time into doing this work. It's what I really love doing, but nobody's talking about it. People are talking about this stuff. But I kind of came to terms with it and realized that I sort of started enjoying this stuff more. And so I started developing my skills for that. These are some examples of some sketchbook master studies that I did. These particular ones after Thomas Moran, one of my few favorite landscape painters. And for one of my classes at VCU, we had to fill up sketchbooks. That was part of the class. We had to take a certain size sketchbook and fill it up. And so VCU tends to, at least at the time I was there, have a very strong kind of line drawing tradition to it. A lot of people doing pen and ink work and really beautiful stuff with great line work. And I am awful with that stuff. I am absolutely horrendous as a draftsman. No one will ever hire me as a draftsman. And I'm fine with that. But I realized that it was taking me forever to fill these sketchbook pages, and they were looking pretty bad too. To give you an idea of just how bad some of that stuff was, I drew some animals in there, and this also shows how bad I am at drawing animals. I drew some animals in my sketchbook one time, and the professor's walking around the class to check everyone's work, and he gets to my sketchbook, and he's flipping through it, and not really saying anything, just checking to make sure I'd done it all. He puts it down and walks over and starts to go to the next person's desk, and then he announces to the class that we're all getting assigned more animal drawings because clearly we need to practice that. So all thanks to me, the whole class had to draw more animals because they were so bad. So between all of those things, I started using my sketchbooks as an opportunity to actually paint. And that's where this kind of stuff comes from. This is because I realized I really wanted to learn how to paint landscapes. And I knew that the best way to do it was probably going to be to do lots and lots of studies of it, both master studies of painters that I really liked, as well as photo studies, because I didn't always have access to beautiful nature. Richmond has a few gems in it if you've ever been there, but it doesn't really have a huge variety of landscapes to paint from. And so I started doing all of these studies in my sketchbook, and also partially because there simply wasn't many landscape painters at the school I was at. It's not something that's really taught in school very often. If you're lucky, your school might have one or two classes in it, but by and large, it's not really a priority for people. I did get lucky in that one of my teachers was actually a very skilled landscape painter, but beyond that, I was kind of left to my own devices. And so I started doing all of these studies. And I believe most of these are just acrylics in a Moleskine sketchbook, so that you can see the paper warping. It's not designed for it at all. But I would do these all the time. And of course, it's a pretty fast way to fill up a sketchbook if you're a lazy student like me and just wanted to get your work done. I would just tape them off and do a master study or two, and all of a sudden I've got a full page. And it taught me a ton. It taught me a ton about how to compose a landscape. It taught me how to paint specific things. It taught me all the color palettes. It taught me all the lighting. It taught me so much about how to actually make these landscapes work. And so I was doing all of this at the same time I was doing all the stuff for my imagination. And so I was pretty geared on becoming a successful landscape painter, and pretty geared on making all of this stuff really happen for myself. And so this is another example of one of the early sketches I was doing. It's not really technically proficient at all. There's not really much painted well in here. It's just trying to get these ideas down, trying to get the color palettes right, trying to get this composition ideas down, trying to figure out all this stuff. This is actually a later piece. The images are a little bit all over the place, but we'll sort of jump around here, and I'll sort of give you a whole idea of how I went from where I was to where I am today. And so this is, all things considered, a relatively recent piece, and shows me actually getting back to that character creature stuff that I really loved doing. And so in the end, I've sort of decided not to fully do environments. They were just sort of a jumping off point for me as my career developed. Um, so if I had actually tried to pursue the characters and creatures and stuff like that, it probably would have been an extra few years for me to get to a professional level, which is why this one took, a few years after I was professional to actually crank out. And so for me, landscapes sort of provided a jump start to getting a career going early on. And it was great for me. It was great because by the time I graduated, I was full-time professional, doing work, getting paid, and paying off my student loans. And so I think it's an important thing to note that eventually I do get back to the characters and creatures, but it's quite a while from now. And this is another one of those personal pieces that I'm doing lately, and gives you an idea of the stuff I'm doing these days. I also got back to figurative work. I do love painting the figure. I find it a really, really beautiful expression of things, and you can definitely tell stories that you can't necessarily tell with landscapes. And so it's been really fun in recent years to kind of get back to that. More and more of these figure paintings. This is actually a model that I shot reference of myself and did these paintings of, and just really fun to get back to this kind of stuff. And again, characters and creatures. These weird sort of creatures and creepy sort of characters. I just love this stuff. This is an example of some of that magic work that I mentioned. It's one of my better cards, I guess. It's certainly one of my more popular cards. You'll note that there's a figure in it, and the figures have sort of gotten slightly bigger and slightly better with each magic card I've painted. And eventually maybe he'll give me an actual character assignment. But for now, I'm actually fairly happy doing all this environment work that I am. You'll note that basically every time you see a male figure in my paintings, it's probably me. I use myself for reference all the easy and really fast, and I'm always around. So you see that all the time. But more examples of some of my magic work that I've been doing. Yeah, they're just fun things to do. This is another personal piece that I did. Really, really important piece for me because it sort of combined my love of strong lighting and environment with also the chance to get to do some really strong figurative painting. I'm definitely a figurative painter, as I mentioned earlier, but I do love the chance to explore and play with the opportunities that it provides me. This is jumping back to doing those sketches. This is another one of those sketches that I did really early on, and just did a ton of these, just trying to figure out general lighting and composition and how landscapes work. And there is a lot to figure out there. There's a lot to tackle, and so that's why I did so many of these. Again, going back to my magic work and kind of seeing where all those early sketches got me. They got me to where I am today with all this stuff. And yeah, in fact, those sketches are more important than you might think. Not actually just a means in of themselves, because they're actually the exact same thing I do for my professional. For my professional work, I turn in actually full color sketches on all the stuff that I do. And so actually the sketches that I was doing early on are almost identical to the sort of stuff I will turn into a client these days. So it's not all for naught, so to speak. Obviously, I've gotten a fair bit faster. Those early sketches were taking me anywhere from an hour to even 2 hours, where about a similar result in about half an hour. I've gotten quite a bit faster at painting over the years. Some work that I did. Another personal piece that I did, again, weird characters and creatures. I do love doing them. I sort of see them as sort of the cornerstone of what I do. It's what I've always loved doing, and it's been fun to get back to it. So. This is some of the work I did for actually just an author. He's working on a story and needed some illustrations done, and he's just a blast to work with. Just gives me great descriptions of these amazing places that he's painted, and it's been a lot of fun working with him. This is sort of the trippiest thing I've ever done. To answer the question, no, I have never done acid or LSD or anything. I get emails almost weekly asking if I have, and when I say nope, nope, yeah, but I have not. This is actually just my sober brain comes up with, which is a little scary, and I don't think I ever should take drugs because I don't think Alex Gray needs the competition. So the fact that this is already in my head is more than a little scary. So this was just a fun thing for me to do. It's totally out there, and it was just a fun chance to paint any kind of crazy form that I could come up with, and any sort of crazy colors I felt like painting that day. It's really just a blast. It was so much fun. I thought about doing some more of them, but I didn't want to become that guy. But you know, one of these days I'll probably go back to it. Much more muted all of a sudden, and you know, back to doing more of this magic work. This is actually one of my earlier pieces for them. Um, this is actually a really groundbreaking piece for me, and it doesn't look all that spectacular or all that important, but it will always have kind of a place in my heart because it's the first finished environment that I did. My first finished imaginative environment that I ever really painted. And for that reason, it's very important to me. For so long, I was doing those sketches after school. And, you know, they were what they were. But they weren't anything finished. I couldn't ever put them in a portfolio. And I didn't really know how to finish anything. I knew how to come up with a pretty decent sketch, but I just didn't know how to actually bring that to finish. And that's where this came from. And from this piece, you know, I developed my actual portfolio, and you'll see some of those pieces soon. But this was the first piece, and was really good for me because it showed me that even though it's nothing amazing, there's a lot of problems with it, and there's a lot obviously I would change now. But for where I was at, this is a pretty close to almost professional level of rendering. And it was nice to know that I could actually get a piece to kind of a professional level at that point. I wouldn't be the greatest artist necessarily. I actually knew that I could figure out how to finish a painting, and that was huge for me. This is another one of those sketches that I was doing early on, really fast, you know, mood and a whole landscape into a painting very fast, and that skill has paid off very well for me. That way, when I do the demo today, I'll probably be able to do a pretty decent painting in a fairly short amount of time for you guys, and actually get it pretty refined. Looks like we've got, I guess, an hour and a half left, and so after I get through all these slides, I'll have more than enough time to give you guys a pretty decent painting to see today. This is some work I did for Imagine FX a couple years back. One of the clients I got to work with, I got to do a tutorial for this piece. The interesting thing about this is that it's entirely painted with the hard round brush. This was during a phase when I got a little tired of people asking me what I used in Photoshop, and so I just said, screw it, I'm going to use the hard round for a while and show you guys that, yeah, I just paint with that and it'll look just fine. And so this is actually entirely painted with just the hard round, which was kind of a fun challenge. I sort of like mixing up my tools like that and playing around with them. These days I'm actually, to answer preemptively the question of what brushes I use, I'm actually using my own custom brushes these days, and am finally put out a brush set of my own, because I've stolen people's brushes for so many years that I thought it'd be nice to actually make some of my own. This is another kind of groundbreaking, pivotal piece for me. This was my first painting for Dungeons and Dragons. This was done actually during my winter break of my senior year. So when I went home from school, Christmas holidays, this is the painting that I was working on, and I worked my butt off on this thing. I worked really, really hard to make this the best painting I had ever done. And at the time, it probably was the best painting I'd ever done. I got really lucky with it, and it turned out better than I was expecting, better than I probably could have hoped for. And it was really, really good for me. And so yeah, this was a good one for me. The interesting thing about this is that when I got the assignment, the name on the assignment was actually another artist. The name of the file was this other guy, .pdf. I was like, oh great, I'm the B-list guy. I'm the guy that they hire when they can't get the other guy. It's nice. So that I'm fine with it. They were super happy with the result and kept hiring me for many years after. And I've had a great working relationship with them. And I think that was probably part of the reason it was a little bit easier for me to transition into Magic so soon after that. Speaking of which, this is that piece that you saw earlier. And this is probably one of the best things I've done for Magic. I've got some unpublished stuff that'll be coming out in the coming year that I probably like a little bit more, but this one still holds pretty strong for me. One of those pieces that I definitely got lucky with. Again, working for some private authors. I actually really enjoy working with authors. They really have a nice kind of vision of what they want and also give you the freedom to kind of explore their world and explore different ways to express that, which I really, really enjoy. This was an art test for a video game company. For quite a while there, I actually had the idea that I wanted to be an in-house concept artist. I've since figured out I actually didn't want to do that, but for quite a while I thought I did. And so this is the result of that. And happy with this one. This one actually ended up in Spectrum for me, despite being a very fast painting. This was actually painted in just, I think, like 3 hours, maybe 4. Fairly fast painting. Again, more personal work, combining my love of weird creatures and cool lighting and all that stuff, and really fun for me. This was a really groundbreaking piece for me. Really, really important. For so long, my paintings were taking me basically 10 hours or so. Excuse me. That's about how long it took me on average to finish a painting back then. And I thought one day, what would it be like if I took twice as long on something? What if I took 20, 25 hours on a painting? What would be the result of that? And this is it. This is the result of taking twice as long on a painting. And of course, all of a sudden I realized, like, oh my God, I should definitely spend twice as long on a painting, because this is a painting that is slightly beyond my skill level at the time, and turned out fairly well for me. And to this day, I'm pretty darn happy with it. Again, as I mentioned, all the figures are me. Every single male figure is me. I happened to already have a shaved head at the time, so it made it pretty easy. This is the piece you saw earlier. Pretty wild, crazy piece. A lot of fun to do, and just a crazy amount of time put into it. But pretty happy with the result of it. It's been a pretty iconic painting for me. This is actually going back one of the first assignments I did. This is one of my first professional gigs that I ever did. Excuse me. This was for Fantasy Flight Games. They paid me peanuts, and they gave me really boring assignments. I get to paint an empty watchtower with like fire and stuff, which is it's all right. This one's way worse because it was just freezing rain, and then literally all I could paint in the description was freezing rain. It was supposed to be just a barren landscape. I wasn't even supposed to have a tree in it, but I managed to sneak a tree in there, and they were fine with it. But it's really, really hard to paint freezing rain with it showing anything, because it just looks like rain. So this was one of my first jobs, really, really boring. I think they paid me $100 for it, and I worked my butt off because obviously I was a student, and this was my big opportunity to be, big shot professional artist, and worked my butt off on this thing. And you can even kind of almost see there's a little skull at the base of the tree. There's actually like a full skeleton down there of some dead guy at the base of the tree. So throwing in this kind of detail work that no one will ever see or care about or anything. But it was kind of fun to throw in there, and I was trying to really impress people and show off and make sure that I actually deserved the jobs that I got. Let's see here. This was the painting I mentioned earlier. This was the painting that got me magic work. I sent this image on a postcard, very long, large format postcard, and sent it to the art director, and that's how I got magic work. But this is another one that I took quite a while on. I shot reference for the figure in the foreground. She's actually decently painted if you really zoom in. The painting's fairly high resolution, so you can actually see everything. And really, really important painting for me. Very simple concept to start with. Basically, all I wanted to do was just paint a big cloud, and that's what I painted. This big, epic, amazing cloud, and that's the result of that. This is some of the work that I was doing while I was in school. This is some of the freelance work that I was doing. This is for a French game company, I believe, and just some of the illustration work that I was doing. This is what I was getting hired to do. Some more of my own personal portfolio development. This is one of the pieces of my first portfolio when I first got to be professional. So yeah, this is kind of where it all started, doing stuff like this. This is going back. You might remember I pointed out one of the quick sketches early on, maybe even the first one, and you'll notice a similarity in the monument there. It's very similar shape and very similar color palette. And the thing is that I painted that very quick sketch exactly a year to the day from when I painted this. And I took that old concept and I repainted it. And this is the result of that. This is the result of 1 year's progress from that point. And just to kind of see how far I had come. And this is the point I got to. This is the result of all that hard work. And this, as we just saw, was also the first piece that got me into Spectrum, which was really amazing for me. Still a student at the time. It was really incredible to have that affirmation that I was doing the right thing and actually getting stuff into Spectrum. So it was pretty mind-blowing. This is another piece that was a part of that first portfolio. Took me, a long time. There's more detail in it than I'm used to painting, and learned a lot doing it too. And yeah, I look back on it fondly just because I remember putting together that first portfolio. And I think this started to probably help get me one of my first jobs, which was working for Legend of the Five Rings, which is an Asian-inspired card game. And obviously they need lots of Asian architecture. And one of my first jobs, complete newbie, had done maybe 1 or 2 paintings before that for companies. And all of a sudden this company approaches me and they need 36 illustrations, which is a little bit intense and pretty darn terrifying for just a guy with no experience to get a job this huge. So that was really fun and really exciting. This is another one of those pieces in that first portfolio, trying to figure out these weird concepts and stuff, and trying to show that I could, put together these landscapes pretty well. And then going back for a second here, this is one of the first quick paintings I did when I was doing those quick sketches. This is one of those first ones when I was just like, all right, I want to paint something. And so I put together this quick little painting of an environment, and that's kind of where it came from. And then jumping back forward again, this was a piece that all of a sudden was in the first portfolio. And I think it shows a nice contrast because there's honestly only about a year to a year and a half between when these two paintings were done. So it's actually probably, now that I think about it, probably less than a year between those two. And sort of shows how quickly I developed these skills to paint environments. And looking back on it, I see that it was mainly because of doing all of that plein air work, as well as doing, obviously, all the personal work, just putting in the time to do all those sketches. And lastly, to do all of those master studies and photo studies and stuff in my sketchbook. All of that kind of combined was really, really important for me. So I think that brings us, if I'm not mistaken, to the end of it. So yeah, we're not leaving. I think that brings us to the end of our slides. And from this point, I'd love to kind of jump into a demo. We've got a bit over an hour, which should be plenty of time for me to get a demo going. And so I think we'll do that now. And I think one of the guys is going to jump on to help me with questions because I won't be able to see the chat. But yeah, we're going to jump into a demo now, if that sounds good for you.
Yeah, thanks, Noah.
Terry again.
Be sure to ask lots of... Oh, sorry, what was that, Terry?
I was just going to say thank you, Noah, very much. That was terrific. I liked your comments about painting outdoors. Just yesterday, or maybe even today, James Gurney, the Dinotopia artist, posted on his blog, which is called Gurney's Journey, the equipment that he uses goes outdoors. And these things that are specific to the media that he's going to use. So students are going to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, if you have any questions about process or what here or anything like that, side of things, obviously art, if you want my opinionated take on things, feel free to ask. I'm talk while I paint. I'm talking while I paint. So yeah, just yeah. So just to go ahead and say a quick few words. Kind of what I'm going to do today is a quick environment concept. So it'll be sort of what I do for my, in that it'll get to the point where refined enough that you can tell what's going on, but finish painting. But will be an idea of sort of the things that I would plant. So yeah.
You know, um, got our first question. Uh, okay, second question. I've been to Spectrum Live each year in Kansas City and have certainly made the rounds of meeting artists. However, I've yet to go with a prepared, serious portfolio, but am well prepared to do so this year. Any advice for game time? Let's see. What led you to realize you were no longer interested in doing in-house concept art? Yeah, I actually kind of wanted to talk to you about this one too. Um, just to kind of, I had a question there. When you were saying earlier in your presentation, you were talking about how you found that you got more out of doing a painting in 25 hours versus 10. Is that also part of what maybe pushed you away from doing in-house studio work concept art? That that you have to be so fast that you are on such a time crunch? Do you think you might be interested in working with indie game projects as opposed to a AAA studio work? It seems like there is potential for a happy medium between concept work and illustration in that vein. How many layers do you tend to work?
Usually one. I'm a bit old school, if you will. I think it comes from probably all the traditional painting and how I was sort of trained that way. But yeah, most of my painting's actually done just one layer. Um, sometimes I get called out for, but I don't know. For me, I find it easier. I find when I do lots and lots of layers, I tend to paint on the wrong layer, and of course I get super frustrated because I've been painting on the wrong layer for a while and have to change things and redo things, and it just drives me insane. So I tend to just make it easier for myself and just paint on one. Oh yeah, and God knows, right? Yeah, I mean, I remember his first post back on CA when he first revealed all of his work, and everyone, so you're painting 3D or something? It's like, no, just hand render. And I remember a lot of guys didn't believe him back then. Um, but Brad does ridiculous work. I love his stuff.
Terry asked, are you ever asked to do corrections?
Yes. I've actually got some to do right now. But not terribly often. I get pretty lucky that partially because when I turn in sketches, I turn in full color sketch. Um, actually, something along the lines of what you're seeing about right now. Maybe like something you'll see about 10 minutes from now. And that's sort of the level that I turn into a client. And I think that's part of the reason I don't have to deal with too many revisions is that usually they have a idea of what they're going to get in the end. Uh, most of my problems are solved about at this point. And so more often I'll have revisions on the actual sketch than on the final, which is, in my opinion, the better way to go about it. I don't like changing my finals too much, even though that does, of course, happen sometimes. I get pretty lucky about not having too many.
Alex says, Noah, what are slash criticisms you would give to contemporary fantasy?
Praises and criticisms. Definitely criticism would, a lot of it is really, 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 a lot of it is really just the same stuff rehashed again. Sort of something I touched on earlier, that you almost used to be able to get away with being technically proficient at, but not anymore. Being technically proficient at things, it's obviously something that's required, but you need to give something more than that. You need to give a little bit fresh or new or something else. We've seen all the time. It drives me crazy that you see the same thing again and again and again, and I just get sick of and start to not be able to tell the difference. It's all the same overly flashy, excessively rim-lit scenes of actiony stuff, same kind of design sense and the same concepts, and it just gets really dull after a while. And so I think bringing something to be a really, really what I'm trying to do with my personal project right now that I haven't really touched on, I guess. Called Man, and it's sort of my over personal working on for a number of years, and it's just something a bit different, and that was part of the inspiration, was doing something slightly different than people are doing, because I do love fantasy, I love science fiction, and I have a problem with it being done the same way all the time. I think you can do fantasy without painting, medieval fantasy. There's more to fantasy beyond just the medieval age. Not everything has to be knights in armor and dragons and that. You can do whatever you want with fantasy. It's the beauty of it, and I think if people realize that and really used it to their full potential, excuse me, I think we'd have a lot better art out there.
That your personal project is also going to be something that people wouldn't expect of you.
I think to some degree, I think it is something of a push. But the thing about the personal project is that basically all the personal work that you saw and you saw me talking about was actually vaguely related to that personal project. It's just I never really put into words that there was sort of a unifying world to all this stuff. I just sort of in my head assumed that, but never really quantified it. And so I think now, oh wait, there are connections between all this stuff. They're going to start to kind of appreciate that and see how that's going to develop.
Like 4 questions today, Lee. So is there a particular reason you were working in a TIFF instead of a PSD? And also, why Lab/8?
Yeah. As far as TIFF goes, I did graphic design for a while, and I was usually taught that TIFF was a better format than PSD. It's similar in that you can save it with all your layers. It doesn't have any compression loss or anything like that, but it's usually a bit more of a universally available format. Printers used to like it more. They like to get a TIFF more than PSD. Nowadays, it doesn't realistically make any difference than anything. I think for a while there I had problems getting Windows to actually have previews of PSDs, whereas I could always have like a little thumbnail preview of a TIFF, and as lazy as it is. So I think that those were a couple of the reasons early on. As far as the lab goes, that has to do with a lab color profile that this file, and that's something I actually only switched over in the past couple months. And if you go to image convert color profile, or you just create a new file, you can actually adjust the color profile. It's entirely separate from the sliders over to the right. I always use the HSB sliders, but the lab color profile has a different way of actually blending colors together, and it tends to be a slightly more natural way of blending colors. It's a bit more how light actually works and less of a kind of dirty algorithm. And you'll mainly notice it when you're mixing, for instance, two complementary colors, something like a red and a green, rather than kind of going all dirty and black in the middle of that transition. It'll actually have a fair bit of color to it. Very subtle, and you can't really notice it most of the time, but it adds enough to it that I've started to notice it and have started to switch over to painting in that most of the time.
Alex Hill asks, Noah, would you say that former, would you say that having a what, Alex? Something before getting into art in the long run, perhaps help you find more of a personal vision. I think you missed a letter, a word there. Let's see. He's writing. Studying programming before getting into art. Do you think that it benefited you in the long run? What languages do you know? Basis of our fine software that we are Park's second software to work in. Um, how is the progress with Sin of Man going?
It's sort of a playground for me to experiment with things. Like last year, I think it was this year. I even put out a poem that I wrote and illustrated, which is so far outside of my comfort zone that I was terrified to do it. But it's sort of a fun opportunity for me to do stuff like that, stuff that I wouldn't normally ever get a chance to do, and that's kind of part of why I really love doing it. Kind of taking my time with it. Even if I spend the next 5 years on this project, I'll, at the worst comes to worst, I'll end up with a really great portfolio. So it's really just a kind of cohesive way to explore my work and paint the things that I really love painting. And that's what it's all about for me. So it's going well. I have some, of course, big visions for it'll pan out in the future um, that I'll talk about eventually. But yeah, for now it's just really fun. Right now I'm sort of wrapping up a short story that I'm working on. Um, a couple more passes of editing on it, and I'll probably publish that pretty soon. And so, again, just a whole new ground for me. Just taking time to do writing as opposed. It's a nice way to stretch my legs, see what I can do actually.
What's your ultimate medium for the intellectual property? Like like what's your? I mean, you looking for film, book. Like what are you trying to do with the novel?
Probably a few things, honestly. I'd like to. I do have a great love of film, and if even I could put together a short film at some point, I would die of happiness. And it's something that I think I realistically probably could manage. Um, when I look at it, it doesn't actually as daunting as you might think. And so I'd love to actually get the chance to do that at some point. Uh, so that's definitely one of the things. I do love games. I used to program games actually for every single one of my programs. I made a game for my final project, and so I love games. And if I had a chance to turn all this into a game someday, that could be really fun. I also read books, and so maybe some sort of combination of art and story book could be really fun. Um, yeah, there's a lot of things I'll do. I personally won't graphic novel. I love graphic novels. I love reading them. I have a huge appreciation for the craft, but I hate actually doing them. I have this idea every once in a while that I'm going to love them and start drawing out a comic or a graphic novel or whatever, and I get about 2, maybe 3 panels in and realize that I actually just hate it. I hate doing it. I can't stand it. I'm too impatient and
Is is it the repetition?
yeah, I think it's a lot of the repetition
Is it the
of
repetition
just
of
like,
characters?
yeah, it's like, oh my God, I have to paint the same thing like 20 times, and I'm like, ah, God, I can't stand it. And not to mention, you don't get to spend as long on each panel as you might on a painting, just because it would take you forever. You can't do full illustrations for each panel unless you have all the time in the world, in which case you better just really love doing comics in general. So for me, that's sort of the problem. I could see someone else to do it for me, and that might happen eventually. But as far as doing my own, I don't know that I have the patience to do it.
Oh, you know what, Noah? Totally forgot this. In the interview process, we discussed uh, every artist's signature and how it came about. So if you get a second to go over that.
Yeah, I can definitely talk about that. Yeah, my signature. Um, my name is of course Noah Bradley, but I actually only sign Noah, and part of that is I guess it comes down to I wanted to have the most pretentious signature that I could possibly imagine. I tend to be more than a little full of myself. I have a couple of ego problems in there, and there's not really that many famous Noahs out there. As far as the art world goes, there ain't that many of us, especially my age or older. When I was born, it was pretty rare. Oddly enough, in recent years, it's become one of the most popular names in America. But as far as people my age goes, not really all popular. So I figured I'd do a competition for the first name, and thought it kind of made a nice little signature and a nice little ring to it, and that's kind of how that developed. And so now I only sign the name Noah. Furthermore, it also came about because at one of the first events I did for Magic the Gathering, I had to sign a bunch of cards, and it involves signing hundreds, perhaps even thousands of cards in a single day, going to do your signature again and again and again and again. And I think for the first couple guys, I might have done Noah Bradley, actually, the full two names. And I just got sick of it. I was like, this is a horrible, terrible idea. I'm going to hate myself forever. I need to change this now. And so then I shortened it to just Noah. And I often joke that at some point I'll get really lazy and just shorten it to a quick little N and, yeah, be done with it. But, yeah. And so I sign my work just the same way with just Noah. It's just a little bit easier for me.
Gotcha. Thanks. So, here's another question. I noticed that you just traveled to Bucharest, and some of these other places you'll travel. There'll be a convention of some sort on there. Um, best to speed paint, like while you demo or speak at those events, or are you there as as someone who's holding space?
In the case of Bucharest, it was their Comic Con there. Uh, I didn't actually demo for any of it. I had the table there and a couple, but no demoing there. But it really depends on where I'm invited to. They will ask me to do and stuff like this. It really, if there's an artist there, he probably gets out of it, so there's less of that happening. But on the other, more artists at something, I'll probably have a good chance of actually doing some. I personally really love demo. Excuse to do it, but I tend to do a little bit more work if I've got. I'm notoriously lazy, and if nobody's watching me paint, I'll slack off a lot. So it's kind of a healthy thing for me.
Terry is asking if you are at the sketch to art director stage yet. So basically, you said you submit your thumbs in color. Is this about where you would be at, where you would submit for a rough idea?
This is actually probably slightly past where I would actually submit, but this is pretty close to it. If you ignored all this rendering on the ground,
Hey, Noah, this is Terry. Let me jump in and ask a question that came up in my mind. This is absolutely fascinating. I'm not an artist myself, but to watch this stuff just flow out of your brain through that little piece of plastic is amazing. Do you have any physical problems when you do this for hours and hours? Do you have soreness in your wrists or your fingertips? You're a young guy. You probably can run marathons, but are there any times when you've just been painting for so long that some part of your working arm says enough's enough?
down here. A lot of it just comes down to seeing what and exploring that, finding there, and figuring out what those are.
So Noah, just to distract you, what's there to do in Melbourne these days? You got some good restaurants you like? Is there waterfront? Is
Uh,
there art museums? Do you guys go out in the woods a lot? What do you and Leisha do?
there are art museums. There's one. It's not terribly good, but they do have one. I mean, Melbourne's a nice place. It's a nice kind of coastal town. It's got a river running through it. It's a really pretty place. There's a fairly community. I know a couple other artist guys that are professional, and we get to hang out sometimes and paint together and do that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, a lot of my time is spent obviously paintings and drawings and Uh, but I try to get out of here and go sit in a coffee shop and do some sketching and stuff like that. But honestly, most of my days come down to either working on or watching movies, playing games, relaxing. Um, I try to take my relaxing time very seriously and make sure I have it every day. Uh, I'm the first thing from a workaholic. As driven as I was while I was in school, I realizing that now that I've gotten to the point where I am professional, I can kind of take things a little bit easier. You can kind of put the brakes on a little bit, relax a bit, enjoy things a bit, and all that sort of stuff. But currently, playing the move because next week we actually fly over to New Zealand and going to spend a few months over there. So we'll be doing a lot of hiking, a lot of painting, and a lot of exploring that crazy, gorgeous, beautiful, amazing place over there.
So you didn't make one mistake. That's really good. Do you have headphones on when you paint and you talk to some friends on the phone and just, I mean, it might be a little daunting to just do this in quiet all the time. What's your studio like? You got a radio on in the background? What's your entertainment?
It depends. Actually, for the sketch phase is usually the time I actually need the most concentration because that's kind of when most of the actual work happens. Most of the creative work kind of happens in the sketch phase. So usually for that, it'll be fairly quiet, maybe a little bit of music, but that's about. I can't focus on too much. For the sake of demoing, I can certainly talk and do all that, but at least when I'm doing my professional work, I usually shut everything out, just have some music playing. Um, but once I get to the rendering stage, since my sketches are basically what I want the final to look like, I can kind of turn my brain off for a while, and so that opens up my possibilities quite a bit. So sometimes I'll talk on the phone to people. Sometimes I'll listen to podcasts. Those are fun. Music a lot. Obviously, chat with my girlfriend if she's hanging out. And uh, beyond that, one of my favorites is actually listening to stand-up comedy. It's a great way to just pass the time. There's a few things better than like sitting around working on a painting and just kind of cracking up laughing the whole time. So that's one of my personal favorites if I've got to spend a long time on a painting.
I think I accidentally muted my mic. I had a question for Noah, and it was about crowdsourcing. If he's, first of all, I don't know if he's done any. Second of all, I just wanted his opinion about the options for young artists about being able to design their careers, be able to develop projects without actually going out and getting them funded or giving them a place to get it funded. And just wanted to hear his thoughts about it.
someone to tell you you're ready. You don't need someone to tell you you can do it. You can just do it yourself.
I was trying to get you to talk about that a little bit. I know you have. I'm guessing, it was my guess, you have a very similar opinion to me on that, and thank you for speaking up. Alex still has a question off. I have a final question before I have to take off. Noah, what is it that inspires you to do projects? For instance, Sin of Man, to go into that direction you're going now.
A few things. For one thing, on a purely visual and setting basis, I've always been very inspired by primitive people. You know, cave people, prehistoric Neanderthals, all that kind of stuff. You know, people sitting in a cave and going hunting and painting on the walls of the cave, and just something really profoundly inspiring to me about that, about what that life must have been like by humans that are effectively the same as us in many ways. And that's always been really inspiring me. So for a set, I found that really just kind of cool place to set all of this kind of stuff. A really base sort of humanity. And using that as sort of ground, I wanted to use this world as a way to kind of tell stories and discuss topics that I find really interesting. Something that I've loved about fantasy and science fiction from my very early years was I loved how it could take very serious real world issues and kind of shed a new light on them by taking a different angle at it and presenting them from this kind of weird science fiction angle. Really great fantasy and really great science fiction. It's telling all these stories and discussing all of this really serious stuff in a really cool, interesting light that's accessible to a lot of people. I look at stuff that I grew up with and really enjoyed these days. I mean, even something like Battlestar Galactica for science fiction. If you really go through the series, it's discussing every major socio-political issue we deal with through the lens of space robots, and I don't know. It adds that. It's very fun. It's very entertaining, but it's very serious. It lets you tackle these really, really serious subjects. And for me, one of the things that I've never really seen discussed and explored exactly as I'd like it to be is the ideas behind faith and religion. And faith and religion have been personally very influential in my life. And something that I've never really seen treated the way I want it to in fantasy and science fiction. You take something like Game of Thrones, and it does a very good job of exploring, family dynamics and, really strong interpersonal relationships, and as well as, political maneuvering and whatnot. And it's really fascinating because of that. And I wanted to sort of take a similar approach almost to faith and religion, and sort of explore all of its wonderful things and all of its terrible things, and kind of why we need it, why we don't need it, what it does to people, and start to explore all of those different issues. What it's like when different religions clash and all of that. I find all of that stuff to be really fascinating. faith has been a very, very pervasive thing for humanity for a very long time. We've always had myths and religions and faiths and all of this stuff that believing in stuff that we can't necessarily see or touch or feel or anything, but yet it seems to be something that pervades so much of humanity all over the world for such a long time. And there's something really interesting and powerful to me about all of that. And so that's sort of what I'm looking to do with the project, is just sort of start to discuss all of those things and probably at least try to shed some new light on things.
You know, I, yeah, I was going to thank him again and tell him that he can stop with his demonstration anytime he wants to. It looks terrific. It's really great to see. I wanted to thank you in another way that you wouldn't have recognized what was going on, but for the first time, the provost of the college that we're working with came in and was watching you demonstrate and seeing how the class was delivered and all of that. And I thank you very much, because you blew him away.
That's good to hear.
I know he had a big smile on his face. So thank you for that. As always, Terry, your interviews are fantastic. Noah, you're very impressive in many ways. I'll compliment you maybe in a way that you don't want me to, or maybe is not common in a different direction, but your ability to communicate and to deliver information, answer questions, and maturity of what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on here and giving me this chance.
Thank you so
much. Treat.
much for taking the time today. Good. I hope we can communicate in the future. Try to your parking. Everybody, you can together and clap for Noah. Thank him. I would want to remind everybody we do have class Monday and Wednesday next week, and then we have class on Thursday.
Yeah, thanks so much. You guys.
Thursdays are makeup of this class, and it will be a portfolio review from your instructors, a whole bunch of us. So from the other side of the world, you're delivering great information. Thank you very much, Noah. Yeah, you too, and hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.